Battle cries have long been a powerful tool on the battlefield, rallying troops and instilling fear in enemy forces. These vocal expressions, rich with historical significance, often carry deep cultural and emotional resonance. From ancient Rome to the American Revolution, they've shaped the course of history and left a lasting impact on those who have heard them. In this article, we explore the origins and significance of some of history's most famous battle cries. Japanese infantry performing a banzai charge during the Russo-Japanese War. Photo credit, Ike de Terracotta / Museum of Fine Arts Boston / Wikimedia Commons / public domain. One of the most iconic battle cries in history is associated with the Japanese military. Kamikaze pilots, along with others who were ready to sacrifice their lives for the glory of the empire, would famously shout, "Tenoheika Banzai." Interestingly, this phrase wasn't originally tied to the battlefield. Tenoheika Banzai translates to "Long live His Majesty the Emperor." The term Banzai on its own carries a different meaning, 10,000 years. It's an expression of longevity and enduring life rather than a call for a premature end. The phrase came to Japan from China, where the equivalent word is wansui. First introduced in the late 19th century, banzai is considered an interjection, akin to English expressions like hurrah and yippee. While context is key, over time the word has become inextricably associated with battle and bloodshed. Commonly linked with peroxide rocker Billy Idol, this eerie exclamation actually traces its roots back to the American Civil War. Confederate soldiers adopted the unsettling tactic, producing an animalistic sound that sent shivers down the spines of Union troops, making the hairs on their necks stand on end. The rebel yell's power lies partly in its mystery. There doesn't seem to be a single, definitive version, yet it instilled fear no matter who was shouting it. In recordings produced after the conflict, it was heard resembling the call of the coyote, but it differed from unit to unit. As for its origins, it's believed the rebel yell was influenced by Native American war cries or Scottish war cry traditions. Let's now journey to ancient Rome, where the sudden eruption of the Barritus seemed to come out of nowhere. However, it was actually a calculated part of the Roman legion's battle strategy. It found its origins in Germanic tribes. As defeated warriors were absorbed into the Roman ranks, their fierce voices remained undiminished. How did it work? Well, the buildup was everything. Soldiers would march, their sandals making no sound on the ground. The aim was to move as quietly as mice before roaring like lions. They'd then begin a chorus of noise, starting low and gradually rising to a thunderous climax for maximum impact. Their shields added an extra layer, amplifying the deadly din. The exact sound has been lost to history, but it was compared to the stomp of an elephant or other wild, raucous noises. Roman historian Tacitus provides further insights. He said that the goal was bring courage into the hearts of Roman soldiers while also striking fear into their enemies. For Texans and many others in the United States, the Alamo and its events are deeply etched into the collective memory. The infamous 1836 siege took place at a religious mission in San Antonio, where a few hundred Texans clashed with about 2,000 Mexican troops under the command of Gen Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Why were they at war? At the time, Texas was part of Mexico. A plan to attract new settlers to the region, intended to strengthen control over the territory, backfired, and Mexican authorities grew increasingly alarmed by how quickly white immigration was occurring. Many newcomers refused to convert to Catholicism or embrace Mexican citizenship, both of which were required by the Mexican government. While slavery was prohibited, some settlers continued the practice. In response, restrictions were imposed, but they were largely ignored. Tensions escalated and turned violent. The Alamo became a brutal battleground for Col. William B. Travis, Davy Crockett, James Bowie, and all who fought during that brief yet bloody period. Most perished, but from the carnage, resilience emerged. Gen. Sam Houston and his forces began rallying with the cry, "Remember the Alamo," to keep their spirits high. A battle cry alone wasn't enough, however, and it wasn't long before Santa Anna was victorious. Attorney, politician, and American founding father Patrick Henry famously declared, "Give me liberty or give me death," during the American Revolution. The year was 1775 and the speech took place in Richmond, Virginia. Addressing the Second Virginia Convention, he aimed to rally support for armed resistance against the British. His words had a profound effect, leading to the creation of a militia to defend the slogan, "Liberty or Death," resonated so deeply that it later resurfaced during the American Civil War, nearly a century after the Revolutionary War had ended. And its legacy didn't end there. Across the world, cries echoing Henry's words would reappear whenever people rose against oppression. From revolutionary France to colonial uprisings in Africa and Asia, liberty or death became more than a call to arms, it was a declaration of human will, the refusal to live in chains. Moving across the Atlantic, another battle cry emerged that would shake the foundations of an empire: "For God and St. George." The English soldiers of the Middle Ages roared this chant as they charged into battle, invoking divine blessing and national pride. During the Hundred Years' War, this cry became synonymous with English valor, ringing out over muddy fields and castle walls. It was both prayer and provocation, a plea for protection and a promise of vengeance. In contrast, the French forces countered with Monte Saint-Denis, the rallying cry of France's medieval knights. Named after the royal standard of France, the oriflamme, this cry symbolized the divine right of the French king and the unity of his people under God's banner. When shouted by an army of armored men advancing beneath the fleur-de-lis, it wasn't just noise, it was a statement of divine destiny. As warfare evolved, so did the cries that defined it. In World War I, the thunder of artillery often drowned out human voices, but that didn't stop men from shouting words of courage before climbing over the top. The British yelled "Fix bayonets," or simply "over the top." Commands turned into symbols of grim determination. German troops shouted "Hurrah," a carryover from the Prussian Wars, while French soldiers often roared "En avant," forward. Each cry, no matter how simple, served the same primal purpose: to remind terrified men they weren't alone. World War II brought new tones and new meanings. The Soviet Red Army's "Ura," a guttural explosive cry, became famous for echoing across the Eastern Front. It wasn't just shouted, it was felt, a sonic wave that seemed to roll like thunder as millions of men fought for their homeland. Soviet soldiers described how the collective roar made them feel invincible, even in the face of impossible odds. In the Pacific, Japanese troops shouted "Banzai," not only in honor of their emperor but as an act of spiritual defiance, an offering of life for country and honor. To the Allies, a Banzai charge became synonymous with relentless courage and suicidal aggression. To the Japanese, it was an act of devotion, one last breath offered to eternity. Meanwhile, American troops carried their own cries, often improvised, often personal. "Remember Pearl Harbor" was one of the most famous, echoing across battlefields from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. It served the same purpose as "Remember the Alamo," to transform grief into fury, loss into motivation. Even today, echoes of these ancient cries remain. Modern soldiers might not charge with swords or shields, but the instinct to rally with a word, a phrase, or a shout endures. From "Hua" in the U.S. Army to "Ura" in the Marines to "Huya" in the Navy, these calls connect modern warriors to their ancestors, proof that courage still finds its voice, even in the noise of modern warfare. In every era, the battle cry has served one unchanging purpose: to unite hearts against fear. Whether whispered by revolutionaries or screamed by soldiers, it transforms the chaos of battle into something almost sacred. A shared belief that some things are worth fighting and dying for, and as the echoes of those cries fade into history, what remains isn't just the memory of war, but the spirit that drove men and women to stand their ground when the world demanded it. Battle cries weren't merely words, they were identity, carved into the soul of every nation that dared to fight. They carried faith, fury, and unity, the three things that turn ordinary people into legends. In every corner of the world, from the sands of Thermopylae to the jungles of Vietnam, one truth has always held firm: a battle cry can pierce fear deeper than any sword. It binds comrades, defies death, and carries forward through generations long after the guns fall silent. Even today, on modern battlefields where drones hum and digital screens glow, the human voice still finds a way to rise above it all. It's the sound of defiance, the reminder that courage has always had a voice. Because whether shouted through helmets or echoed through history books, the battle cry remains humanity's oldest anthem of resistance and resolve. So the next time you hear "Ura," "For God and Country," or even "Remember the Alamo," remember these aren't just echoes from the past. They are the living heartbeat of history itself, roaring across time. Throughout history, the roar of a battle cry was only one part of the chaos that filled the battlefield. Behind it, and sometimes leading it, came another force just as powerful: music. Long before modern communication, drums, horns, and chants became the lifeblood of war. They guided troops, inspired courage, and struck fear into the hearts of enemies who could hear them echoing from miles away. Sound wasn't just noise, it was strategy. It could control rhythm, dictate pace, and even alter the outcome of an entire campaign. Imagine standing on the plains of ancient Greece as the Spartans marched forward, their shields gleaming and flutes playing a haunting, steady rhythm. Every note was calculated, every beat designed to keep their ranks synchronized and their minds calm before the clash. The melody wasn't for beauty, it was for unity. In ancient China, vast armies moved like a living machine under the command of war drums and gongs. Generals communicated through coded rhythms, signaling advances, retreats, and ambushes without uttering a word. The deep thunder of bronze drums not only kept order, it terrified the enemy, who often believed the sound itself carried divine power. Meanwhile, among the Scottish Highlands, the bagpipes became a weapon of spirit. Their shrill, unbroken wail cut through mist and fear alike, turning even small bands of warriors into something far more formidable. To their foes, that sound meant death was coming. To their comrades, it meant home, pride, and unbreakable defiance. The Ottoman Empire used its own sonic weapon, the Mater Band, the world's first military orchestra. With pounding drums, clashing cymbals, and piercing horns, the Ottomans announced their presence before their soldiers were even visible. The music was thunderous, overwhelming, a signal to the enemy that the Sultan's might was near and resistance was futile. Even in modern times, echoes of these traditions survive. Military bands still lead parades and ceremonies not merely as decoration but as a reminder of that ancient truth: sound moves the soul. It commands emotion, unites hearts, and transforms fear into purpose. The battlefield has changed, but the rhythm of war has not. From the war drums of ancient empires to the rally songs of soldiers in the trenches, music has always marched beside humanity's greatest and darkest moments.